Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuhu. Um, for those people who are attending, could you just let me know if my audio is okay? And I apologize for the delay in starting this live session tonight. So if I could just get a quick yes or no, if the audio, I would ask for a thumbs up, but let's see. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Allahumma salli wa sallim ala Sayyidina Muhammadin wa ala alihi wa ashabi ajma'in. So I want to begin by asking Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to remove bala and the tribulation from the entirety of Bani Adam, from all of Bani Adam. We're seeing now more and more the effects. We're hearing the news about janazas that are being held, people who are passing away because of coronavirus. We're also hearing about people who are going through it. I myself have a close friend who's just getting out of it. I also have family members that the entire household it's gone through the entire household. So it's getting closer and closer to our homes, and with that, we shouldn't increase in our fear. We should increase in our connection to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and realizing our incapacity, our ajiz, and asking Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to remove this baliyah, to remove this tribulation from us, and for those who are sick to get cured a complete and quick shifa. Ameen ya Rabbil Alameen. What I wanted to talk about tonight is the concept of silatul rahim. Silatul rahim is connecting with the rahim, with your family members. So this is something that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala talks about the believers as a description of the believers, that they make these connections to one another. And this is something the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam also would encourage people to do, silatul rahim. So I will just type that into the transliteration into there. And sila, it's with a sad, comes from like to make a connection. So the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam told us to do this, and that it's an integral part. It's a foundation. It's really a necessity for the believer to have this, to be focusing on making these connections. So what we want to analyze is, if the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam is telling us about silatul rahim, we want to know, what is this first part? What does that connection mean? And this rahim, the kinship bonds, or the relationships. So connecting relationships, making a connection between relationships. We want to know, what are these two concepts? So if at the end of this live stream, or if you're watching this after it's been recorded, if somebody says, well, what did you learn? You learned the concept of silatul rahim, connecting to relationships, and you know what the connection consists of and what that relationship consists of. So let's talk about first that relationship. And the reason why it's very important, this week I have water. I have to regularly clear my throat. So inshallah, it's not corona. But this week I had water. Last week I said maybe somebody can okay, so why is it important, and why am I thinking about this and the importance of it? Well, because in this time, we are all, through social distancing, we're now forced in some areas by law to maintain a distance, whether it's the 6 feet, not going out without a reason. Certain places they're imposing fines. Here in the Bay Area, they're imposing fines. Also in other areas, I've heard about fines being imposed as well. Some places, the police are taking it very seriously. So there's this forcing of people um, from each other. They're forcing them away from each other. So what are people doing now? And this is actually something that we're seeing. People are connecting more. So even though in the situation we're being pushed away, we're connecting. So this connecting with each other is really, it's an integral part of human beings in general, but also for the believer, we do it as an act of worship. And the Prophet ﷺ told us to do this. He also said that the people who cut the rahim off, it's one of the worst sins. That's called qat' al-rahim. So now people are going out to their neighbors, checking in on their neighbors. People are checking in with their families. They're leaving notes on their neighbors' doors, especially the elderly. Do you need anything? I'm going to the store. Would you like to have anything? People in public areas are talking with each other more. How are you doing? Checking in with each other. Again, this checking in with each other, that's what silat al-rahim is. Just checking in, making that connection. And one of the things that our scholars point out is that your relationships are of two types. There's people who you don't have any connection to. You're not connected to them, but there should be a connection. You should have a connection with them. And then there's people who you should be connected to, and you're maintaining that connection. So let's just give an example. You're living at home. You have your parents with you, your children, your siblings, whoever it may be. You have this connection. These are people that you're supposed to be connecting with, and you are maintaining that connection. You walk in the door, you say assalamu alaikum. The salam, this is one of the most important parts of maintaining that silatul rahim. When we look at what the Prophet ﷺ did when he first came to Medina, now think about this. When he first came to Medina, there were a number of issues, including contagious disease, or I shouldn't say contagious disease, but a fever. There was a fever that would affect people usually who were not from Medina. So people who would come from outside Medina, when they would come to Medina, they would get affected by this fever. And if you read the seerah, when the Prophet ﷺ, when his father had passed away, they had gone to Medina, which at that time was known as Yathrib. They had gone to Medina to visit some relatives, and his father became ill with the fever that was known to be a part of Medina, and that's actually what he passed away from. And later on, the Prophet ﷺ would made a dua to have that fever removed outside of the city of Medina. So this idea of there being a some sort of an illness that's affecting the entire community, especially outsiders coming in, this was something they had to deal with. There were also economic issues they had to deal with. There was also political rivalries. The people, the Meccans of Quraysh, didn't want the Muslims. Remember, think about how the Prophet ﷺ, when he left Medina, Mecca, he didn't leave in a situation where, you know, they bid him farewell, good luck on your new project, your new endeavor. No, it was, they hunted him down. They did not want the Prophet ﷺ, nor any of the other Sahaba, to leave Mecca, because one of the things that it would cause would be the rest of Arabia, who looked at Quraysh as their leaders or their nobles, protecting the most noble thing that the Arabs had, which was the Kaaba. They looked to the Quraysh as the nobles of all of the Arabian Peninsula. And so if the Muslims started leaving, the other people in Arabia would say, what's wrong with you, Quraysh? You can't take care of your own family? I mean, look at this. When the Sahaba, when they went to Habasha, when they went to Abyssinia, Abu Sufyan and others went to follow them to try to get them back. And when some of then when the Sahaba went to Medina, they started trying to bring them back. They would have to make their hijrah during the cover of night. The Prophet ﷺ, and of course, in the famous hijrah story, the most famous that we tell our children, and we study that story. There's poems made about it, and nasheed. We commemorate the hijrah. Our calendar is based on the hijrah. We have so many stories about the hijrah. But remember, he left under the cover of secrecy, under the cover of darkness. They were being hunted down by a tracker named Suraqa. And I'm not going to go into all of the story, but just think about this. When he came into Medina, sallallahu alaihi wasallam, it wasn't just moving from point A to point B. There were a lot of factors going on. Now, when he gets to Medina, and now there's no more religious persecution. They have this freedom. They're choosing him. They're electing him, sallallahu alaihi wasallam, as their leader. They're saying, we're going to protect you and we will support you, even if it comes to arms. Like if we get attacked, we will protect you. We're willing to protect you with our lives. We'll distribute our property to help the immigrants, the muhajirin. So there was this. It's a huge turning point in the history of the 23 years that the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam was during his prophethood. Now, what are some of the first instructions that he gives his community to now establish? What are the Constitution? You know, the founders of here. I'm in the U.S. I know there may be people tuning in from other places, but they always talk about the founding fathers and what was the philosophy that impacted them, and why did they choose certain things? Like, why is the First Amendment to the Constitution freedom of religion, freedom of speech? Why is the second one the right to bear arms? Like, why do we have these amendments, and why do we have them in this particular order? And why do we have these? And why don't we have other things? Because the founding fathers sat down, they looked at their situation, they looked at what was most important to them. They looked at the things that would really ensure protections for them because of the previous colonial rule and the British rule and so forth. Illegal search and seizure, the right to due process, all of those things were very important. The Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he tells people, "Afshu salam," spread peace. Wa at'imu ta'am, and feed people, and pray. Wa sallu, pray at night when nasu niyam, while people are asleep. So here, these three elements. Look at these three elements. There's the element of spreading peace amongst people and feeding, not just smiling and giving them a good word, which is good and important, but it's also feeding. And this is going to become more important as people lose their jobs. There's going to be a lot of people who lose their jobs. And so feeding people, especially in your locality, is going to become really, really important to get involved in those initiatives. So the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam made a very a foundational rule to spread peace. Well, to spread peace, the spreading of salam, that is the most basic way to do silatul rahim. So if somebody says, well, how do I connect with people? Just saying assalamu alaikum. The ability to go to another person, another human being, and say assalamu alaikum, or to greet them in whatever greeting it might be, that's the most basic part of silatul rahim. Below that, a person's cut off. If two people are walking in the street and they don't like each other. They're like, I'm not even going to say hi. I'm not going to say what's up. I'm not going to say salams to that person. Now those people have a disconnect. That's a qata' of rahim. They might have been brothers, friends, community members, whatever it might be. And they might have a reason, valid or invalid. But the point is, that is the most basic thing. If a person cannot say hello, cannot greet somebody, cannot give salams, they have now cut off that connection. So the most basic connection is giving the salam, and that's why one of the reasons why the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam reminded people to do that. Now, if you look at this, look at the order. The Prophet said, spread salam and feed people. Now, when you say salams, usually people don't just say, hey, how are you? Hi. They don't just say hi or assalamu alaikum. Assalamu alaikum. How are you doing? Kayf al-hal. And we might think about this as like, oh, it gets mundane. You ask you wake up in the morning, especially if you see people a lot. Your siblings, your parents, your cousins, whoever it might be, your coworkers. Hey, how are you doing? I'm fine. How are you doing? I'm fine. But think about this. This is like a constant check that human beings have to be constantly checking in with each other. How are you doing? How are you doing? How are you doing? Most of the time, and I think that's probably everybody would have this experience. Most of the time, people would say, I'm fine, thank you, how are you? Or ana bi khair, whatever greeting and response might be. But if a person is really in a situation where they need help or they're not doing well, they might say, I'm not doing okay. Oh, let me see how I can help you. That's where the feeding comes in. Feeding is not just food. Feeding is giving any type of nourishment to this person who's in need. Giving any type of nourishment to this person who's in need. So there's an ayah in the Quran that talks about freeing prisoners and feeding prisoners. And in the explanation, one of the great scholars of Andalusia, Imam al-Qurtubi, he says this feeding is not just food. It's not just physical food. It's giving this person whatever they need. And if sometimes a person might have enough food, but he or she needs somebody to talk to. So if you have friends, check in with them. And if they're not doing well, have a conversation. You don't have to be a professional. You don't have to be a coach or a therapist or a counselor. Just listening to people and telling them, giving them some good news or trying to, cheer them up. Those are all very important things. Okay, so we have this concept of silatul rahim, making the connection. The most basic element of the sila is the salam. And we see this coming from the seerah of the Prophet ﷺ and how he laid a foundation in Medina. Check in with each other. Now, this is important outside of the house, but let's start inside the house, because we start with, it's like concentric circles. You got the circle, like you have yourself. Most important thing, and we talked about this last week, or it might have been the week before, self-care, making sure you're taking care of yourself. Because if you can't take, if you're not well, you're not well. You can't really help other people and look after their needs. So your first circle of concern, yourself, then your family, your immediate family. So now most people are stuck with their immediate family. You might think, well, I see them every day. I can kind of tell that they're doing okay. Why do I need to check in? Well, it's just, first of all, it's sunnah to be saying salams to each other and keeping that greeting going. Some of the Sahaba, they would, if they were traveling, imagine they're traveling and a rock came in between them. I'm just going to take something off my desk. This is actually a little sand thing. It says Jordan on it. My father's from Jordan. I was born in Jordan. And a rock came in between them. When they would come around the rock, they would say salams again. They would repeat their salam. They would renew their salam. So, if you wake up in the morning, even before all of the cultural sabah al-khair, good morning, whatever, those cultural things, they're fine. There's no problem with them. But start off with assalamu alaikum. As the beginning, spreading the salam, and then you do the check-in. How are you doing? Now, some people will actually tell you, not feeling well, kind of got a headache. So now you respond. And this is why it's important, to self-care, to know, I think I talked about this as well, somebody being hangry, anger caused by hunger. You want to check in with people. If somebody says, I got a headache, you can do a quick list of things just to check in with them. Have you been drinking enough water? Have you been sleeping enough? Have you been eating enough? You do those 3 checks. And if somebody's like, yeah, last night I only got 3 hours of sleep and I didn't drink any water today and nothing since yesterday. Well, maybe you're dehydrated, which could cause a headache. Maybe you're hungry, and so forth. So you're checking and you're doing a basic a check-in with that. Number of years ago, I had a doctor tell me, he said, there's 5 basic things that you can look for. If you're not feeling well, just do a self-inventory and check those 5 things. And if you're good on all of those and you're still feeling bad, well, maybe there's something else that you need to check in. Food, making sure you have enough food, making sure you have enough water, making sure you have enough sleep, making sure you don't have too much stimulants. And the stimulants could be caffeine, or it could be screens. Kids, when they or even adults, if they get too much screen time, they get too much video games, you can see their reactions. Or sugar, any type of stimulants, too much of it, too much junk food, too much TV, too much of any of that stuff, that's going to make too much coffee, too much tea, too much whatever of those stimulants. So food, sleep, water, stimulants, and then stress, making sure the person doesn't carry too much stress. And he said, if you check all of those, it'll help you in so many different ways. And he was speaking specifically about making sure the heart and the rhythm of the heart is good. So that's a good quick 5 check-in. Now Google, they said make sure you're doing all of the 5 things: washing your hand, coughing into your arm, social distancing. What's the other one? I mentioned this last week. Let's see. Google the 5 things. What are the 5 things they're talking about? Okay, the 5 things that okay, wash your hands, cough into the elbow. I have my ad blocker on, so all these newspapers don't want to give me free information. They want to sell me something. Okay, wash your hands often, cough into your elbow, don't touch your face, keep your feet, stay 3 feet apart or 6 feet. And if you feel sick, stay home. So that's their 5 check-in. So you can do that physical check-in. And this is important too, because we want to stay well. We want to stay healthy so that if a virus does come to us or in our area, in our house, and it starts going through our neighborhood, through our house, that we're strong enough to fight it. We want to be in a good state. So just remember that. Check in about your food, your sleep, hydration, water, the stimulants, and then the stress. So now when you ask somebody how are you doing, you could also help them check in with that. How'd you sleep last night? Oh, I slept great. I'm doing so this could be a basic conversation that you're having with your brother, with your sister. There's adults here. I know this is aimed at youth 13 to 18, but I think people of all ages and are welcome, and people from all over the world are tuning in. But you can do this check-in, and that can be a conversation. How are you? How was your sleep? Or even we see in the seerah, the Prophet ﷺ used to do a beautiful thing, and all of what he did was beautiful, and he was the most beautiful person. But one of his beautiful sunnahs that he would do in the morning is after Fajr, he would ask his Sahaba, have any of you seen a dream? And if they said yes, they would tell them about it. So this is something that I've even brought into our house. And I'll ask my kids, have you seen a dream? And so it's a nice conversation. You get to know the person. You get to know what they're going through, and you might get some insight into that person's personality, maybe some of their fears. And if it's a true dream coming from Allah or from the angels, you might get some wisdom that you wouldn't have been able to get outside of that area. So it's a good sunnah. Ask people about their dreams. Ask them how they're doing. So make sure you're doing the salam, which is a check-in, and then if they do need something, whether it might be advice or they need help with something, if you have a younger sibling at home and they're feeling hungry, and I talked about this on the first week, help your families out. You have a younger sibling or younger siblings, and they need some food, but they don't know really how to do anything in the kitchen. Well, get in the kitchen and make a meal. You don't have to wait for your parents to make that meal for them. Help them out, and then you would be doing that sunnah of spreading the salam. That's hey little brother, hey, checking in. Little sister, how are you doing? Oh, I'm hungry. Let me go to the fridge, get some things together, make a snack, make a meal, and then you're also helping out your parents. So you're bringing in that Medina Constitution, that Medina Bill of Rights, and bring it into your house and making your house a little Medina. So even though we're all stuck at home, we can turn our houses into a little Medina. So you're checking in. The salam is very important. The checking in, then doing something for the person that needs help. That's where the feeding comes in. Now, outside of your home, that could be the neighbors. That could be your family members in another house, across town, across state, across the country, across the world. You're checking in. I mean, the blessings of having the internet and the phones. It makes that check-in so much easier. So you can do that, and it's an easy check-in. Last week I talked about the easiness of being silent and how you can worship Allah by just being silent. Well, you can also worship Allah by checking in, by getting out your phone or going online and calling your grandmother or your grandfather, your uncle. Make a list. You can make a list of all your cousins, people that you haven't checked in with, and just keep a tally of checking in with them. The Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, one of the descriptions about him in his shama'il is he used to yatafaqad ashabahu. He used to ask about his sahaba. If he didn't see one of his sahaba come into his normal routine, he would ask about him. He would say, you know, we haven't seen so and so in a couple of days. How is he doing? Or let's go to that person and check on how they're doing. Or if they're sick, he would go to them. So checking in with people. And think about this. Here is the messenger of Allah, sallallahu alaihi wasallam, the greatest of all creation, the greatest of all messengers, the greatest of all prophets, the greatest of all human beings, the best, the best in the entire universe. And he's the leader of Medina, and he's asking about his Sahaba, who are anybody that met him and believed in him. He's asking about everybody. So he's never above, even though he is above all creation. And in a hadith, he says, Ana sayyidu walidi Adam wala fakhr. I am the Sayyid, the leader of all of humanity, and I'm not boasting. Meaning, I'm not saying this out of boastness. I'm not boasting of this position that Allah has given. He's just merely mentioning a fact, a blessing that Allah has given him, and he's saying, I'm not doing this out of boasting. But here is the Sayyid of Waladi Adam, and the Sayyid of all of creation, the Sayyid of Kaun, and he's asking about people. So never be above. We should never be above asking about people. We do this in our house. We can do this to our neighbors, our friends, and use all of the tools that Allah has blessed us with. And then we're checking in. So that's the sila. So remember, the most basic sila connection is to say salams. Assalamu alaikum, hello, hi. But of course, we're saying it as assalamu alaikum to be in accordance with the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam sunnah. And if we don't have that, if we're not able to say salams to somebody, then we know there's a break in that connection. And now we have to do silatul rahim. So when you're looking at that list of people that you want to connect to, there's maintaining connections, and then there's creating connections or repairing connections that aren't there. So think about the people that you're in regular contact with. Great job. Keep maintaining that. But more importantly, look at the people that you're not in contact with and start reaching out to them. And think about maybe what are some of the reasons why we haven't, I haven't reached out to them. And I can maybe in a later halaqah address some of those things. The final thing that I want to mention before opening it up to questions, and actually you can go ahead and type in your questions, and then that way, because I want to be respectful of the time. I know we started about 20 minutes late, but I want to end it right at 9. But you can go ahead and start typing in your questions. So who is it that we should be connected to? Somebody might say, well, is it just my family? Is it my neighbors? Is it my friends? So the rahim, this family or kinship bonds, is of different types. The one that we have to, that's the most important bond to maintain, connection, relationship to maintain, are our family, the people that we're related to either by blood or by marriage. These are the people, and the importance is the closer that person is to you, the more important that connection is. So your parents, for those people who have children, your spouse, of course, if you're married, your grandparents, your uncles, your cousins, your second cousins, your other uncles, and then you keep going out. It's all important to keep that connection, but you're giving more focus to the people that are close by, but not neglecting the farther away relationships. So you have the family relationships by blood or by marriage, but there's other relationships that you have as well. One of the primary ones are people who have taught us or our fellow students. So when you're in school, when you move through classes, you have a connection to those people. If you see them, especially years later, like I sometimes meet people who I was in middle school with or in high school, And I have a closer relationship with them than maybe somebody else that I met when I was, after college. Why? Because we studied together. We learned together. At the time, we didn't realize that. We just thought, oh, we're friends, we're at school, we see each other. But in reality, education and learning is a big part of what makes us human. It's one of the things that Allah has made us different than all other creation. As Muslims, we don't believe that we came from apes. We believe we came from Adam alayhi salam and from Hawa, his wife, who was made from him. And Adam did not have a father. He was not one person in a progression of the evolution, like the Darwinian evolution theory. We don't believe that. The Quran tells us very clearly, just like Isa, Jesus Christ, did not have a father. We believe in the miraculous birth of Jesus. Jesus alayhi salam, peace be upon him, did not have a father. And the Quran says that the situation of Jesus, Isa alayhi salam, is like Adam, in that neither of them had a father. How were they created? Miraculously. Adam alayhi salam, no father or mother. Allah created him from clay and brought him to life. Isa alayhi salam had a mother but no father. So we believe in miracles. We believe that Allah can do whatever he wants. And we don't believe that Adam alayhi salam came from apes, or that we're descended from apes. So one of the things that Allah has distinguished us from all other creations is language. He has given us language and the ability. Other things learn and other things have their communication, but speech, it's specific to humans. And also our ability, the speech and learning, the learning that we do, no other creature has that. So this is one of the things that Allah has ennobled us with. So when we're in the process of learning, it's a sacred process that's happening. It's something that's very, very special. So the people who are involved in that's your teachers, your fellow students, the people who are supporting you while you're doing that. You have a connection to all of them, and you should maintain that connection. Okay, who else do we have? We have family. We have people in our educational process. We also have, of course, people who are in our community. This is why it's so important to go to the masjid. The masjid is not just about performing our prayers in the masjid. It's also so that we can check in with each other and we can maintain that connection. So being connected to those, the people who are in the community, that's another rahim, another connection that we have to maintain. Also people who you're connected to, maybe not in the same community, and maybe they didn't study with you, but they study similar things. So if you're, say for example, if you're in you're studying Arabic, or you're memorizing the Quran, or you're studying Islam, the Sharia and the Deen and the laws of the Deen. When you meet other people who are studying the same subjects, even though they're not connected to you in the same class with the same teacher, there is a connection of just learning and knowledge. And so those connections are important. If you meet another person who has similar studying, and it doesn't have to be just religious education. If you're studying accounting, for example, and you meet another accountant, you're going to hit it off because you speak the same language, you know the same jargon, you like the same things. If you have a hobby, those are all people that you can have a connection with. And you can turn those connections into a form of worship. So you're getting closer to Allah by building up those relationships and having those relationships for the sake of Allah. For the sake of Allah. That's really what's important for us to remember. Somebody can say salam all day long to people, give greetings. They can feed people all day long and all night long. But if a person is not doing it for the sake of Allah, for the sake of God, it's a completely different person than somebody who is doing it sincerely and for the sake of Allah. Why? Because there could be an atheist who feeds people. There could be an atheist who goes out and checks on his neighbors and making sure. And at one level, we say that's great. It's better that the atheist is doing that rather than the atheist who doesn't do those things. And Allah calls those people who don't feed, calls them to account. It says the people who end up in the hellfire, one of the reasons, the things they say they end up in the hellfire is that not only did they disbelieve in the afterlife, we did not encourage people to feed the poor. That's one of the things that gets people into hellfire. Not just belief, but lack of action. So if you have an atheist who's doing that, but it's not for the sake of God, there's no belief in God, and it's not for the sake of God, then Allah says in the Quran that it's that He makes the actions of the disbelievers haba'an manthura, like dust, spread dust. And the haba, if you sit in like especially in the afternoon sun or the morning when the sun's shining through your window, and you can see that really, really fine dust, the fine particles. So it's not even like the dust that gets kicked up in a windstorm or when a truck comes by or in a field when people are playing baseball or football on a field, that heavy dust that'll settle down. No, we're talking about that fine, fine, fine dust. That's haba. And that's how Allah says, or that's the description that Allah gives for the people who do actions but have no faith. It's like haba'an manthura, just spread dust. So that's why it's important for us to always remember, why are we doing things? We're doing it for the sake of Allah. And that's why we're doing things. We're not doing it just for the preservation of the connections and just for the preservation of other people's health and well-being and just for the preservation of humanity. No, we're doing all those things. Those are all the end results, but we're doing this for the sake of Allah. So, and if you look at the end advice of the Prophet ﷺ, it was spread salam, feed the people. So make the, do the greeting. So you make the check-in. And you can see, Assalamu alaikum, how are you doing? Oh, I'm kind of hungry. All right, let me feed you. But then the third thing he said is Sallu bil-layli wan-nasu niyam, pray at night when people are asleep. In other words, have a regular routine of not only checking in with your human being fellows and helping them, but a daily check-in with your Creator by worshiping Him, by doing dhikr, by reflecting on His book, by reflecting on His creation, and renewing that connection that you have with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So all of these other connections, the reason why we're doing it is to please Allah, to please our Maker, and we want to continue. We want to also make sure that we're not cutting off our connection with Allah. So with that, I'll end and open it up to questions. I don't see anything coming in. I don't see any questions coming in, but I will end on this. Checking in with other people in our community is going to be very important. And for the youth there, when you check in with people, you might learn about what their families are going through and what the struggles that they're going through. And one of the repercussions of this coronavirus and the economy slowdown is it's expected that a lot of people are going to lose their jobs. And the percentages are sometimes pretty high of what they're expecting. So as you're checking in with people, how are you doing? If somebody says that their family is struggling because they have a parent who is out of work, you can make dua for them. You could console them. You could also, if you do have connections, if you know somebody in the masjid, you could connect them to the masjid. Say, hey, have you looked into the masjid? They might be able to help out with rent, help out with food. You might be able to find some services to connect the people to. So that's something that you want to be aware of. If you yourself are going through this, if you have a family member, your parent, or somebody who's struggling, don't feel shy about reaching out for help. That's what when we check in with each other, how are you doing? We really want to know, how are you doing? So if you're going through some struggles, whether it's financial, reach out to the community. There will always be somebody who will listen to you. Just keep that connection with various people, and reach out to ask for assistance or to ask for advice. on how to move forward. And also whether or not you're experiencing yourself financial difficulties, if you're feeling anxious or fearful about what all of these changes that are going on, there's no problem with that. It's okay to feel it's okay to feel afraid, and you turn to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and you turn to his servants, and you open up. And there's a lot of resources that are being collected and given out as packets and PDFs and lectures and so forth about how to deal with anxieties and fears that a person might get during this time. So reach out. Again, I mentioned last week about the Family Youth Institute, the Khalil Center, Nasiha. There's a lot of very, very good resources that are available. I can type them into the chat here, and hopefully that'll be or we could put them in the description of this this video. We'll put some links to some of those resources. And Jazakumullah khair for everybody for attending. And it seems like we have people from all over the world, as I had expected. So if there's any final questions. Very good question. How to explain to your elderly father to stay in the home so he doesn't get sick without getting rude or disrespectful? Very good question. And it is a dilemma, because as Muslims, as human beings, but especially as Muslims, we have to respect our parents, and we have to give them advice, and we have to point out things when they do something that's wrong. We have to point out things that are wrong, especially when or we have to do those things without causing them to become angry and to feel disrespected. But at the end of the day, if something is harmful to them, we have to mention that to them, even if they feel disrespected, because you're doing it for the greater good. Like in this situation, to go out. Well, one of the things is I would suggest maybe showing some of the videos or some of the statistics of the areas where they're really getting hit hard. Like, for example, one of the epicenters for this this outbreak is in New York City, and there's videos, because just yesterday they hit their peak of how many people have passed away because of this, and the hospitals are overwhelmed. So sometimes seeing those pictures of the hospitals being overwhelmed and of the trucks outside of the hospitals might really make it real for people. You know, I think for a lot of people, and I'll speak for myself, when people started talking about the coronavirus, this at the beginning of March, I, like many other people, said, well, what's the big deal? You know, what's the difference between this and flu? 30,000 people a year die from flu in the US. Nobody's making a big deal. Well, there is a lot of differences. And now, you know, all of what they say, the incubation period is longer. So you could infect people, you know, a lot more people before you even know you're sick. Whereas the regular flu, as soon as you get it, you know you're sick, you stay away. That's one issue. The other issue is more people need hospitalization. Most people with the regular flu, the flus that come through in the flu season, they can get better at home with over-the-counter drugs. These 20% of people who get the coronavirus will need hospitalization, and then all of those hospital beds being taken up will cause other people who have other illnesses, not corona related. It'll be pressure on the hospitals, and we're already seeing that. There's not enough masks to go around. There's not enough beds at the hospital. They're setting up tents in fields and so forth. So maybe showing some of those statistics might make it real. For me, going back to me, when I saw the pictures of Iran, and they were digging these mass graves, the trenches, and they had the body bags, for me, I said, oh, that was when I saw those images and those stories, I said, this is serious. This is no longer just something that we can take lightly. And, you know, also hearing some of the people I've heard, some Islamic scholars who were asked about this, and most of the scholars very quickly said, yes, don't go to Jum'ah, you don't need to, it's not an obligation because there's fear and so forth. But there were some that said, no, you keep the masjids open and keep the congregation. And I said, what is it going to take for this person to realize this is a serious situation? Do they need to see the body bags in their locality? And, you know, unfortunate as it is, maybe some people, that's the imagery that they will need to see to get the message. because just listening to the health experts was not enough for them. So maybe showing them the images, showing them the statistics, educating them rather than telling them, or maybe also ask them what they know. See, this is another thing too. Sometimes when we come to give advice, we don't know where the other person is coming from, what understanding they have, what's their conceptualization of the situation. Like, how do they really understand what's going on? So what happens is, and this is also in that check-in, ask them, what do you know about the coronavirus? And why do you think it's not a problem to go out, especially as a person who's 75 and at a higher risk level? And maybe if you can see their logic on why it is that they don't see it's a problem, you can address those specific situations, because maybe their logic on why it's not a big deal is over here, but you're talking over here about some other points. So we want to know exactly where it is. And maybe even in asking them the questions, you know, sometimes when you ask people enough questions and you have them come to their own realization, that's also a powerful motivating factor. It doesn't mean it will definitely work. But one of the things we see the Prophet ﷺ, we see him do with his Sahaba is that he wouldn't just tell them, this is wrong, that is wrong, do this, don't do that. Sometimes he would very clearly, you can't do this, you can't do that. So that's definitely one route to go. But another way of the prophetic da'wah, of the prophetic invitation and teaching of Islam, is that he would ask them questions. Ma bala aqwam. What do you say about a people who do this? So just asking people questions and getting them to convince themselves by just asking questions. You're not trying to be sarcastic. You're not trying to be spiteful or angry with them, even in your tone of in your method of asking. You're really sincerely trying to understand where they're coming from, and maybe by hearing that conversation, they will convince themselves. The last question is, and we'll end on this. I'm already 5 minutes over the hour. Where is this lecture from? This lecture is from MCC in the Bay Area, Pleasanton. I'm, of course, broadcasting this from our home because in the Bay Area we have the shelter in place, so we're actually mandated by law to stay in our homes except for basic shopping, for basic essentials and necessary medical trips and other essential aspects of society. So I'm broadcasting from my home here in the San Francisco Bay Area, but this is broadcast through MCC, the Muslim Community Center in Pleasanton, California. Jazakumullahu khair. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala bless you and bless your families and protect you and protect your families. And may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala make this tribulation a source of purification for all of us, and remove this tribulation quickly and allow us to see wisdoms and draw benefits from this tribulations. Ameen ya Rabbil Alameen. I have a friend, as I mentioned, who went through this, who just got through it, and he said now he understands why some of the Muslim spiritual masters used to say it's important for us to take account and to realize the blessing of every single breath. Because for him, when he got this, when he got the coronavirus, he said breathing was really, really difficult for him, and it was difficult just to take every breath. And he just was calling on the names of Allah. Two of the names of Allah that he used to hear our teacher Murabat al-Hajj in West African Mauritania call out: Ya Hafid, O protector, and Ya Mani', O preventer. And so he just kept repeating these names, and alhamdulillah, he's out of the coronavirus. But it really taught him to really recognize the blessing of just being able to take a breath. He said if he just moved he just moved his head over to the other side, just that energy of moving his head from one side to the other, that would make him cause him to feel winded. It was so difficult. So Jazakumullahu khair. Again, this is Rami Nsour from Muslim Community Center in Pleasanton, California. May Allah protect you and protect your families. And we call on Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in all of his beautiful names, Ya Hafid and Ya Mani', O protector and O preventer, to protect us from this virus and to prevent the virus from affecting us. And for those who are affected, to prevent them from serious illness or death, and to protect them from all harm. Ameen ya Rabbil Alameen. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah.